Amitofo, good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are very happy to have the former president of Dharma Realm Buddhist University, Dr. Snjezana Akpinar, give a talk to us. So while we are waiting for her, we will briefly introduce her. Dr. Snjezana Akpinar was born in what is today the Republic of Croatia. Her master's degree is in philology, the study of languages, from the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Belgrade, while her doctorate in Ottoman language studies is from the University of Istanbul. Throughout her professional life, she concentrated on studying and investigating world religions and their relations to each other, and to finally spend the last 30 years at the City of 10,000 Buddhas and Dharma Realm Buddhist University. Dr. Akpinar, I could say a little bit more. Her father was a Buddhist monk in the Theravada tradition, and because he was vegetarian, when they moved to the United States, she found the City of 10,000 Buddhas as a place that he could stay. He was also a well-known professor, and he gave classes here. And later, Dr. Akpinar was invited to be the president of DRBU by Venerable Master Hua, and she has also been a standing member on the Board of Education for our schools. Her classes at DRBU have often been to introduce Central Asian cultures, both pre-Islamic and Islamic, and their connections with Buddhism. In fact, we have published a book by her. I have to look up something like Buddhist meditations on Buddhist contemplations on Islamic meditations. And it is talking about a very close connection in Central Asia between the literature and the religions of Islam and other and their culture and Buddhist ideas. So maybe she would say something about that today. And also, it's very timely since right now in the area of such as Afghanistan and Pakistan, there has been so much conflict. And it's good to know some of the early Buddhist roots in those areas.
What it's all about is Afghanistan, and it is DRBA who asked me to give this lecture, so I'm happy to do so. Anyway, what I chanced upon some time ago was an interesting book. I am a scholar of the Middle East and the languages and so on, so it was very hard for me to not see the horror in what is happening in Afghanistan today. And that made me very sad, let's put it that way. But I came upon a book about a year and a half ago, a recent book written by a gentleman who is a professor and a scholar, and who spent a lot of time in Afghanistan as just looking for things. So I will read to you what he himself wrote about this book, because my enthusiasm and my wish to discuss it came from his say, from his own introduction to this book on Central Asia. And what drew me to the book was what he said first, that the book was written not because he knew the answers to all the questions that the book has posed to him. The book drew him. Again, it was the same book, more or less. And it wasn't also a thing that I knew the answers to the questions that the book posed, even because I had any particular knowledge of the many subjects and fields it touches upon, nor because I had any particular knowledge of the many subjects but because I wanted to read a book like that. So he wrote this book not because he knew all about it, but because he was drawn to what's going on in the world. He wanted to read a book like that, and there wasn't a book. So that's what drew him to write a book like it. And I thought that was very interesting, because I also wanted to write a book like that. This is probably many years ago. And because of that, I went and I studied Central Asia, the Middle East, the languages and everything like that. But I saw that to study the languages is really not enough. And that you really have to study also the people interested in that area who come from the areas around Central Asia. Just knowing the language, which I knew more or less, the main languages spoken there, is not enough. You have to understand what people put into their thoughts about that country, particularly if you're a professor. So he also felt like that. So that's what drew me to the book. And then I realized that he said I would have preferred that there was a book of that kind. And he also said he would enjoy reading it. So all that fit me. I was in the same boat, so to speak. And that was what made me want to go and read the book. And then I realized that the main point he had, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm so flustered after all this thing that I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he wrote a book, this gentleman, his name is Frederick Starr. And Frederick Starr wrote the book, and he called it Lost Enlightenment, Central Asia's Golden Age. And that drew me to the book even more, because the main point of it is that it was sitting on the word lost enlightenment. To me, enlightenment means Buddhism, right? Something that you can see. And that something that you can see is lost. It's lost in front of you. And you're staring at it and not seeing it. It's a little bit like this introduction to my talk today, that we had half an hour of effort to just get me on the screen. And frankly, it matches the situation of right now, because that's exactly what's happening to me and to many of us. All these computers and machinations and electronics stand in the way. This is my private point of view. It stands in the way of seeing something. You know, it would have been so much better if we didn't have to go through all of this. If I was right in front of you and you were looking at me and I was looking at you. But technology in this case got in the way. And somehow a similar thing happened to people who come and go from China to Spain on the Silk Road. And on the Silk Road, what we call now Afghanistan, is actually the middle point, the central part. That's why it's called Central Asia. But people don't think of it like that. they might think of it, but not really. But if you look at a map, which I will not try to show in order not to get into further complications, Central Asia is in the middle on the Silk Road, between China or Beijing and Spain. So it's in the middle of Eurasia, let's say. And the thing that helped us, or helped me at first, to understand this central point is also the fact that in such points in the world, or even on a short trip, if you go to visit your aunt from LA to San Francisco, you might have a point where you go and have a cup of coffee or something. And that point is what we think of as Afghanistan. And then when people say Central Asia, they don't really understand that Afghanistan is the center of that world of Europe and Asia. So it's right there where people congregate as they traverse this road from Beijing to actually Venice, where I'm almost come from. But anyway, this is a central gathering point on the road for merchants mostly, because the Silk Road was the merchant road. So if you forget Afghanistan and where it is, and you can't understand really what's going on. And there's a third issue in it. And that third issue, which I would say, is greed. Because people right now want to get into Afghanistan for the same reasons people around the Silk Road days, or 1,000 years ago or so, or even earlier, would gather there. It was a gathering point, and a point where you stop and think of resting a little bit. So that is all part of the story. And people who started this gathering point as a space to gather and get together and talk to each other on their way back and forth from China to Europe, or from Europe to China, gathered there for thousands and thousands of years. Now, what got me there into this book, apart from all that I have said right now, is the fact that I come from the Balkans, which is the end of the road almost. I am from the corner of this huge road. And so people from my part of the world, which is the Balkans, and Italy, which is right next to the Balkans, was there. So it is very hard to understand it all. Can you hear me? Sorry? Or somebody else is talking. I really don't know who's talking. But anyway, I was reading the beginning of the book. So people are still in the same mode, if you want to know. If you are thinking of it from a different point of view, from the point of view of Buddhism and greed, you will see that this greed and this also this friendship between people comes from this getting together. And we today are caught in it. When I say we, I mean the whole world, almost all the people that live in Europe and Asia, the space. We have to think of it as a space. And if you think of it as a space, then Central Asia is plopped right in the middle of this Silk Road, let's say, and of the greed that exists in the world. The greed to get there first, to be the best, to be the wealthiest, That is the worst part of it. So we tend today as human beings to race to get there. And we don't think of this war that's going on in Afghanistan now as something that's there and that's beautiful and that's very civilized, you would say. But we only think of them being the Afghans, let's say, as people who stand in the way and who are very primitive, and we don't even want to study about them today. And so our curricula and everything else, think of them as people living in caves. And they're far from it. I mean, there are caves in Afghanistan, but there are caves all over the world. And then we zero in on what's going on, what's bad in that area, even today. And that is really quite sad. And then we laugh at it. I mean, that's very, very sad. And we even did disconnect the concept of Central Asia from Afghanistan. Afghanistan is Central Asia. And it has this beautiful, really beautiful culture. And we push them aside. Now, I'm speaking here as a European. Although I'm not, I'm also a Buddhist, and I see these things. We are competing as Europeans, and we push the Afghans away. We talk all over about Osama bin Laden and this and that, and all the ugly things about Afghanistan or Central Asia. You can call it one or the other. Afghanistan equals Central Asia. And that is a very, very sad situation, if you ask me, as Buddhist. And I think our school is incumbent to learn something about the rest of the world and the good parts of it, those that will not draw energy away from it and push things into a corner. But what can I do? You know, that is how the world is. So there is no way we can complain about that except becoming aware, awakening actually to the beauties of the world, and not being sucked into the corner of the uglinesses of the world. But you have to make the effort. Don't try to snatch things away. Give it some goodness, because that's what goodness is. Now, to switch a little bit and tell you what is happening in the world today and what had to hurt this whole issue all along, is that people generally in schools and educational systems don't really understand something that is very Buddhist, and that is, what is the noble silence? When do you speak? When you don't speak. And you don't speak in order to help something move along. And then you push something in the corner, and we all hope we'll make it do if we speak more and more. It probably won't, but it might. And this doubt that we have, the people who want to help, and there are many of them, fall into an optimism. Oh, we'll make it, we'll make it good, and so on and so forth. So by trying to make it good and being optimists, we really don't make it good. We just hope to make it good. And then we sing songs and jump around and are happy and send warriors there and things like that. But it's something that one has to understand, one has to reflect upon. And this reflection then is what we would call skepticism, in my way of thinking of it. And skepticism for me is doubt. we don't want to doubt. We don't want to jump over the good and over the emptiness that's between the good and the bad. There's an emptiness there. It's Afghanistan, let's call it. That is our emptiness today. So it's a deep ignorance, nothing else but ignorance. And how do you bridge that gap? You bridge it with your humaneness, with being a human being. And that is something that we need to concentrate on. By being humane doesn't mean being nice to people necessarily, or wanting to grab a lot of things to become famous or make lots of money so you can help or send an army there. That is not the way to go. Anyway, Starr himself, which this talk is actually based on Starr. He started out as an archaeologist. He is probably my age, and that's why I'm attracted to how he went about it. As an archaeologist, he started out in Turkey. And he studied all the languages that I have studied. He's more or less my age. I don't want to go into details about that. I've never met the man. But anyway, he is about my age, and he started out in Turkey and digging, with a shovel, really digging. That's the sort of guy he was. And he dug actually in Western Turkey in a town called Gordium. And by being in Gordium, the main thing of Gordium that anybody who's halfway educated in Europe and in the States too will remember that Gordium is the place where Alexander the Great, who is a Greek, let's call him a Greek for this purpose, although he's much more than a Greek, but anyway, Alexander the Great was eager to go and conquer the world. So he took off. And the first place he came to was Gordium, and there was a huge knot. It's called the Gordian knot. And so Alexander the Great came there, and the people of Gordium asking, can you untie this knot? Now, you have to get into the metaphor of it, of course. And Alexander the Great, being young, he was only 14, 15 or something like that, said, no, he tried. And he just unstuck the knot a little bit, and they said, this is not worth doing. And he cut it. So usually people study that in school in the Western world. So the Gordian knot is something Alexander the Great cut and took off, and he didn't know where he was going. But he was going to Central Asia. He was going to Afghanistan, actually. And he got there, and he died there very young. This all happened rather quickly. And so I thought of it as Starr was digging around Gordium, that he must have had similar obstacles as Alexander the Great, the Great. And he came to his Gordian knot because he was actually digging in Gordium physically as an archaeologist. And that's what forced him or pushed him along the road. And the good thing that he said about himself, which is something that I think is worth remembering, and I hope I will find it now after all my I have a quote from him. He came to Afghanistan because this idea of the Gordian knot and the whole story, the mystery around it, and how Alexander the Great got to where he did, was something that was pushing him across. So for nearly the point of all of this, I'm coming back again, is that he, for more than 2 decades of his life, he spent doing trips to Afghanistan and back, and digging and going through every center, every nook and cranny. So he spent more than 30 years of his life trying to understand the whole point of this, why Afghanistan is so interesting to people. And he wrote the book of it. And he took him 30 years to write the book. He spent a lot of time. And time is what I'm trying to say is very important. You have to live with it. You can't just look at it and go away. You have to live in it. And so this writing of the book and the curiosity that he had for Afghanistan were his constant companion. He was with it for 30 years. And it is that time that he went, and he went around to the Karakorum Desert, to Turkmenistan, to all that area, and spent time in the cold of the Pamir Mountains. And he may not be qualified, he says, as I'm not qualified, to undertake a book like that, to write a book about the lost enlightenment. But he can say that he spent his constant life, his constant companion, 30 years trying to figure it out. And that is the important, it's the time you spend on something. And it's the time we today, our culture, and not us, you and me, but our general politics is such that we want to go quickly, conquer, and come back. It will not work. It will never work. And it is no fault of the people who live in Afghanistan today that we're doing that. And that this has been done to them, actually, because they were hiding, or a good number of them must have been hiding in their mountains out of here. But the people of Afghanistan are sticking with it. It's their country, and they want to do what they like with it. So now, after having said all of that, I can say that Afghanistan was, or that area was Buddhist to begin with. And that is what told Starr, that awareness brought Starr to write his book. Here, this place was a Buddhist place. And we all know that, actually. We've seen the statues of the Buddhas, that were blown up and things like that. So this is a very old and very Buddhist place. And that we should never forget that. And that Buddhism is still in us. And we do not like to remember that somehow. Because Buddhism is what drew, because of our personal dislike of Islam for some reason. And that's where the crux of the matter is right now. How did a Buddhist country become Muslim? And it became Muslim, and this is what Starr discovered. It became Muslim because the area was Muslim. The elite of the country became Muslim, but the elite of the country before Islam, which is around the 8th century, 9th century, was Buddhist. And their most famous people, their kings and scholars and so on, were Buddhist. And they willfully became Muslims, consciously, as good Buddhists. They became Muslims. So they look at this thing, we think of about Muslims as having invaded the place. No, the Muslims have invaded the place. Everybody invades everything. I mean, you could say that the Americans are invading it now, but that's irrelevant. The Muslims were there attacking, basically, and the Buddhists particularly famous Buddhist family, the elite of the place, by the name of Barmak, who were good Buddhists. They were first to become Muslims. And so they invited the Muslims. They didn't turn around. They said, sure, we are good Buddhists, but we can deal with the Muslims. We can become friends with them. We can melt with them. We can turn it around. And that is a very, very important discussion or decision. And they are still there. That is my point. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, but it happens. Or it's on the way to happen, but it takes time. So one important thing is the time. And the other important thing is the invitation turned around when you are facing danger. And that to me is very Buddhist, at least I see it like that. If it weren't like that, the world would be even a worse place than it is now. So I will tell you a little anecdote about Turkey, since I studied these languages because I wanted to go to Afghanistan and do these things, but I didn't. So this book attracted me. But when I heard in Turkey, there's a famous story when the end of World War I came by, in the 20s, let's say, the Pope, like everywhere else, sent an emissary to the newly formed Turkish Republic. The empire was gone, lost, finished, but there was a country there, much smaller than the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Ottoman Empire was. And so the country was set up, and the person who set up the country, Atatürk, wanted Turkey to forget the past and to turn westward. He's going the other way on the Silk Road, let's say. So Atatürk, the father of Turkey, as they call him these days, not all of them, but some of them. Anyway, Atatürk asked the people of Turkey, the elite of Turkey, the let's say the priests, the literary people, and the priests. Let's call them priests for not to wear the turban, the thing you put around your head, because they are now in Europe. They are facing west. They have to be modern. So the elite, the conservatives, were saying, "Oh my God, we won't do this. We'll have a revolution." Now that so they called a meeting of all the religious people. This is happening in Istanbul, and the representative of the Catholic Pope, of the Christian Pope, decided to go. And instead of wearing his papal hat, whatever that was at that point, he decided to put on a French beret. And he came to that meeting, and he said, the issue is not in what you wear. The issue is what's in your head. You have to use your head. And he did that by wearing a beret. And that's a very interesting concept, but that stopped the fight. Just that hat that he wore, the beret, the French beret. He said, okay, you want to be Western, put on a beret. And so he came with the beret, because the issue is inside the hat, not outside the hat. So he's also telling them, use your head, think, and stop fights by thinking, not by fighting. The only thing that can help you become a human being is to use your head. And that is the main thing. And I have a feeling today that in the Western world, and the empire of the West today is undoubtedly this country. the United States. And it is a big country and a good country because it's a mixture of all people that have been invited to come in. That's quite unusual. In that sense, the United States today is Afghanistan. It's the center of the world. And all people are welcome, as they were welcome in Afghanistan in the days of the Muslim, what they would call invasion. But said, no, they are friends. They became friends. So they are Muslims now. And then, of course, there are many people, because people are not all the same, who become Taliban. And the sad part of it is that the word Taliban in the Afghan language, let's call it that, it's much more than that, but anyway, means the learned ones. So they took a word, or the ones who search for wisdom. That's basically the literal meaning of the word talebe. Talebe means to search, the searchers. So they have turned the word around, or not all of them, but some of them. And instead of searching from inside, they are searching from the outside. And we are also looking at this and saying, my goodness, what's going on in Afghanistan? But by turning the word Taliban into something angry, they didn't do a favor to themselves, to scholarship, or to anything else. And I think we need to understand that for our own sake, our own scholarship, our own integration, if you want to call it that, and our own kindness, that the humanity is the important thing, the kindness that a human being can achieve with their heads. And not only with their heads, with many other things, but scholarship is part of it. And so we need to open up, not close down to anything. And that is a lesson that we need to learn. And the thing that I always quote whenever I can is when talking about Buddhism, but that is the going forth sutra. It's one of the sutras anyway, but there are many others. And there is a piece of it that when before the Buddha awoke, he left his palace, right? He went out into the world. He snuck out basically he jumped the wall. But before finally jumping that wall, before finally stopping being who he was and turning around, he went out from his beautiful palace and saw people dead or dying or unhappy. And he asked, what is this? What is it? He asked it to himself. And then he finally, at the moment when he was the happiest almost in his palace, he realized, no, if I keep sticking to this happiness, wellness, everything fantastic, I will not leave this world. I will not understand it and I will not help it. So you help it by leaving it. That is the left home people, what you call. And the left home people, which is the people that willingly, decisively leave home. Not the ones who leave home because they're scared or because they want to go and fight and because they think the world is wonderful. It isn't. We are trying as human beings, and human beings are the only ones who can do it. Gods can't. That is the beauty of the sutra that I also like to quote. I think it's part of the Pabaja Sutra, but that doesn't really matter. It is that before his awakening, the Buddha, in his dream, saw Shakya, who is the head, the god, or whatever, the top of this world. And Shakya came to the Buddha in the dream and said, this is bad, this world is bad, what shall we do? Right? Who can help us? He's asking, the God is asking the Buddha, who can help us? And the Buddha then answers his famous answer, only a good man who is living the proper life has a chance, won't do it, but has a chance to do it. And there are very few of those who are capable and strong enough and brave enough to do that. So he's talking about something that we could call a spiritual hero, if you want to call it a hero. And even they only have a small chance, and hardly anybody gets that, makes it to the end. And the point of this story that I'm telling right now is that the Buddha was asked by a god when he was worried just before his awakening, because the god didn't know, but Buddha as a human being understood the god. And he said, only a good person, a learned, kind, good person, basically kind, can do it. And I don't think that we right now, people living in this world, and even at the city of 10,000 Buddhas, are inclusive and yet not drawn by it. Sometimes you can see that it's very, very hard. It needs somebody like Shifu. Shifu was one of those people, but there are people around the world, but very few who can do that. And Afghanistan at this point may even have them, but their voices are drowned by our own arrogance. By our, I mean Western world's arrogance. We portray Afghanistan and we portray Islam right now as from the top. Not that they're saying the wrong things, much of it is true, but it is looking down at them. And this looking down is not something that will help us. And increasingly, this world, we are like a ball rolling down a hill, and the faster we roll, the further away we get from where we want to go. With our path, that's where Taoism, for example, comes in handy. They have ideas like that, but it is this inclusiveness, and Afghanistan needs a lot of it today. But we look at our newspapers and our journalists who are our teachers these days, and they are all in this mode of thinking we know everything and we'll tell you what it is. And some of them are doing good jobs, but the better ones know how to be quiet and listen, but not many. And I like journalists, and journalists can do a lot of good, but they too should be able to follow what the noble silence is. And in Afghanistan, the people who are going to, who the journalists today portray as the bad ones who are coming to power and grabbing it all back again, I don't know that the journalists are doing anybody a favor. So there are those who are. I'm not saying that that's not true, but it is that silence that needs to be kept, I think, but intelligently. And so that is something that came out of Afghanistan. And if you read the book, I don't want to tell you the book now. I could, but what's the point? It is there were so many wonderful things, and still are probably people who are silent today. And the journalists are yelling and screaming how horrible it is, bad people feel falling off airplanes and so on. Yes, because the world in itself is not perfect. We all have to understand that. Whether you're a Buddhist or a Christian, and you're hoping for a God to come and save you. will a God save you? A human being can, though. That was the point of that sutra where the Buddha said to a God, and that is the point of that whole thing. The Buddha is being asked by a God. He's not talking to a God. The God is begging for help. And that doesn't mean that the God is good or bad, or that a bodhisattva is good or bad. But what is a bodhisattva then? A bodhisattva is the one who's trying to help, maybe. He is in between. But a bodhisattva, the concept of bodhisattvahood then is what we need to understand, or it would be good if humanity could understand it. And unfortunately, this, I'll do it better than you can. I'll do this, I'll do that. That is arrogance. And unfortunately, that is on the road. But it has been on the road all along. The minute everybody shuts up, the arrogant have more space. And they are not even aware that they're falling in this chasm of arrogance. And but in a school, the job of a university, the job of the world, Dharma realm is the whole universe, is actually to try and understand that. Will we understand it in our generation? I really don't know. I doubt it. But that's my skepticism again. We need more skepticism in a good way. And hopefully, one of these days, we will make progress on that road. And this COVID crisis that we went through is part of that. I don't know what it is. Shall we believe people who are in the COVID mode and saying, let's shut down, clamp down, close up, build an even bigger wall so nothing can happen to us? Or shall we go and believe the scientists? Because the scientists, we should respect them. Or people who have gone to school and have degrees, sure. That's why, but is that the final word? They are also searching. They are, as they would say in Afghanistan, still the ones who search. They are looking for something. They are the Taliban, actually. That's what the word means. And so to say, to bow your head and behave to somebody who's supposed to be your boss or a stronger person who can beat you into something or anything. So that is the strength of Buddhism, if you ask me. And it is also the strength and the wisdom that is useful on the path, but it is still a search. And Central Asia, or Afghanistan, which is Central Asia, is a territory, a space where that was happening for ages, because that was the center of the Silk Road, or of travelers, of wealthy people, basically, or people who wanted to be wealthy. And they would meet there. That was the midpoint. So they would sit there in an inn, and what's called a roadside inn, and chat and talk about their own customs or their own ideas. So great schools were built around there, great universities. And there, wonderful art happened there. And it's still around. We don't know, and we don't even know. When you talk today and mention some famous people in the West and in the East, but for example, Ibn Sina, who is a famous philosopher, he was translated somehow into Latin, because Latin was the language of the West, the learned language of the West. So some of them were translated, and Ibn Sina helped us make progress on that score. And somebody translated him. Who translated him? From Arabic. And Ibn Sina was not an Arab. He was from Afghanistan. And most of these people in the world, which we consider to be the Muslim world today, are from Afghanistan. You have a long list of them. If you look at the book, Frederick Starr's book, you will see the list of all these people, and he talks about them. He didn't know how to portray this. It's a very hard thing. I couldn't do because I didn't have enough energy and will to do that. But Frederick Starr did. And what he did is he didn't look at the books only, he did that too, at the books and at the wisdom of the West, the scholarship of the West. He traveled into these countries and he talked to people, not only the known people in the West who are in the field of Central Asia or Islam, let's say, but also people who still live there, who are around there. And who come from today's Russia and all around it. He went and he talked to the scholars of that day and read the books of these scholars, no matter where they're from, whether they're Turkish or Arab of today's modern Arabia, or Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, or Russia, or China, or wherever. Now, China actually, he had one thing again that I kind of identified with. He learned quite a few languages and had interpreters, because you have to read the scholarship that was done 1,000 years ago and translate it. But for that, you need to know the Germans, who did a lot of good scholarly work, the Russians, who did a lot of scholarly work, and many others. So he managed that. But when he came to China, and that's happened to me too. I mean, I knew all these languages, so I tried to read more. But he came to a point where he didn't do anything about China. He just didn't know Chinese. He didn't speak Chinese. He left that closed, that door, because he couldn't make it. And I understand that too very well, because I came to that point when I was young, not now. I kind of tried to make up, but not too well. It is a whole new world, and your own life doesn't last that long. You have to decide what not to learn, basically. And China was a convenient thing not to learn for everybody, because it's hard and it's totally different from the West. So we're not moving. The Western world is not moving from its own palace, from its own comfort. And I managed to sneak a foot into the door of China, thanks to you guys. And thanks to Shifu, and that was a wonderful treasure for me. But right now I'm old, and so that's where it stopped. I cannot read Chinese and the scholarship and the translations of all these things that were written in Afghanistan by various people who came to Afghanistan, learned each other's language. And when the Muslims conquered that area, let's call it conquered, but were spread out, it is the Buddhists who conquered the area, who stayed there. They didn't go anywhere. They stayed there, but they accepted people in there. And they ended up, we think, the Westerners, as Muslims. And as Muslims, they're bad, because the West has a thing against Islam and never really studied it enough. But that's besides the point. But all these things contribute to this idea that you want to close in and you don't have time. And we don't. Nobody does, to have that much time to do that. But Starr was aware of it, and he didn't know how to portray that, how to tell the world something about Afghanistan in a way that was pleasant. Because if you start boring people, they don't listen to you. I have lots of experience with that. But anyway, he decided to turn this book into a stage and make a play out of it. And this is incredible. So he divides the book into 7 chapters, it's 7 acts of one play. So he turned it into a theater mentally. And I thought that was a pretty neat trick to do that, to turn the book into a theater. And while thinking of that, it turns out that I thought, gee, before learning how to read and write, before people started carving things into stone and on paper and so on, they were performing plays, and they would gather the whole village or the whole town or whatever, because they knew how to speak well. And so the plays and dramas are a very, very old tradition. And we don't know when it started. It started before people started writing words down, that's for sure. And that is something that is a very interesting concept that Frederick Starr brought into his method for teaching people about Afghanistan and Central Asia. So that was quite a good deed, let's say, for the world, if you want to look at it like that. He thought of the book in order to put it somehow together as a play. And it had the performers in every act. There are a few of them, and he puts these interesting people in. And then you go to the next act, and then there's other performers and how they connect together, and then you change the stage a little bit. He actually did a very good job as a writer and as a scholar. And let us not forget that he, as a scholar and as a person who was traveling throughout Afghanistan, let's call it, or Central Asia for 30 years, and then sat down to write the book after 30 years, not after going to a library for a year or two and writing another book. He really made a good point. That's all I can say. And I'm sort of proud to be able to become aware of that. That's all I can say. So I would suggest, if you are interested in how people try to express their ideas and how people try to put each other in contact together, you read that book. You will not remember all the actors in the book because there's quite a few of them, but it will make you aware of a different way of looking at the world and of being a scholar. And that part of it takes you into the concept of time and of space, because space is important, as is time. It's a long trip from China to wherever. And it's a long trip, also an inward trip, to become a good human being, which is much longer than anything else. And we're looking at it, and frankly, it reminds me of traveling along this country with my children when they were little. They're grown up, I have grandchildren. But we were in a car, and you look at things that we've traveled. And my son, when he was, 3 years old or something, he would keep saying, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And we weren't. It's a long trip. And to get there takes a long time. And we're far from getting there as humanity goes and as human being goes. So keep at it, travel, but don't think it's fun, for one thing. Don't think it's an ordeal. No, that's not true either. But running away from the ordeal, we become such optimists that we forget that we're not after running away from an ordeal. We are just on a very long, long journey. And I think I managed to speak quite a bit. Maybe some of you have some questions. I know that the book exists in our library, And it is a book that tells you how people can be friends, how people can be joined in a human way, the humane way. There is the word human and humaneness. And only a human being, as far as I know, in this universe can really take that journey upon himself. His mind is such that we can go further than anybody else. By being human and kind and good to each other, and not start out by always saying, no, but the but is important, or anything like that. It is just waiting and being kind. So I practiced a long time to start out by not saying no or but still saying what I wanted to say. And this is what I'm doing tonight. It's that is, you can start out basically, if you are a Buddhist, by saying the Chatukotika, the four corners, in your mind. When somebody comes at you with anything, you start by saying, yeah, this is the civilized human being, let's call it. And you say, why? It could be, it's true. If you're an educated human being, you don't say it's true. In your mind, what comes to your mind first is, interesting idea. And then you turn around and you say, it could be true. And then you say, but it also could be false. Not everything, but not every true is true. And then you start thinking, but it could be both. It could be a little bit true, a little bit false. And then at the end you say, well, it could be none of the above. By then you've gone through your four corners, and the four corners, if it's a piece of cloth, let's say, that you are having on the road, you put them together and they go off, or you travel with them and you keep going as something on your back. So that's what it is. And I can see somewhere here that somebody's trying to ask a question, and I would very much appreciate the question. If I may not answer it the way I am, but if you have a question, think of it.
The question from Daniel is, why did Buddhism disappear in Afghanistan?
Did it not? What I'm trying to tell you is that there are many things that you say by not saying them. And Buddhism did not appear. The words to describe it have not appeared yet. But if you think, you don't have to say it disappeared. Officially, it is the official, the thing that you belong to, and that you would call Buddhism, may have disappeared. But Buddhism is something that goes beyond words. That's basically one of the things. It's there. We have to look for the words to make it. But if you say, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a whatever, then you already put a wall between yourself. You make an organization, and that's fine. But that you have to stay in the limits of that organization, and that is very hard because there are no words. Buddhism is the noble silence, but you can become friends with any kind of person, sit down and have coffee with them, or talk to them, or just sit there, or be on the road together with them. And then you come to a point where you go one way, the other one goes the other. But to say that it disappeared, that's short-sighted, in my view. So the wall that has to be lifted is to say, I mean, there's no way to say it. I don't know. To say is also not a good thing. But in Buddhism, there are things that go beyond words, basically. I am a linguist. If you really want to know, I studied lots of languages. And at the end, they all get flustered in my head. And of course, you have to speak one language. You don't have to do anything. You can be quiet, and it's preferable. But when you know so many languages, you don't become wise, smart, or Buddhist or anything else. But you have a lot of stuff in your head, words, basically. And then you see that none of them really match what you want to say. And so Buddhism disappeared on one level, but if you read this book, you will see what an incredible civilization, not in Afghanistan, but throughout the world, came out of Afghanistan. It was born there, or of people who were from Afghanistan and went all over the world. So there are things that go beyond words and beyond what you learn in a book, because you go to school and you learn it disappeared. And then you also have the other list of Buddhism is this, and that. All of that is true. But it didn't disappear. It's there. It's just a matter of trying to explain exactly what Starr in his lifetime tried to explain. It is a country of Buddhists still. If they don't call themselves Buddhists, it's fine. But you have to see what's behind it, what the sensations and the feelings of those people are. And in there you will find Buddhism. And you will see that there's such a thing as a noble silence when you are so kind or not kind, but silence, sometimes it's better. And Buddhism lives in the silence because nobody has come there yet, right? We have a long way to go. I don't know whether this helps or not, but that is what I'm trying to say. There are concepts. You have concepts, you have words, you have thoughts, and those thoughts are there, and we are trying to express them. And they're deeply buried in these ideas and concepts and lies. Or lies are sometimes not even lies, but an incapacity to express something properly. And the human beings are the ones who have the potential, it seems. And we all deep inside have the potential, but it's hard work. And it does go beyond words. And scholarship should help, but sometimes we go into the wrong direction in scholarship. And sometimes we also, if you read fairy tales sometimes, and I'm not suggesting we start reading fairy tales, but in any country, in any tradition, fairy tales are sometimes nice metaphors for all of that. Like we all use it, like let's say Sleeping Beauty. You know, Sleeping Beauty is asleep, and don't think of the tiniest details of it. Sleeping Beauty is somebody that's a brave hero, let's call it, or a prince discovered as he was traipsing around the woods. And by becoming aware of that person, he woke up a whole kingdom. Things of that kind. Or I go into Western fairy tales because that's what I was brought up with, like the Grimm's fairy tales, the Brothers Grimm. If you read Grimm, you realize that it comes from that kind of wisdom, but it's a story, it's a fairy tale. Or the other day, as I was flying back from Europe and being really tired and old and fed up and my knees hurt and everything, they had on the plane, I was trying to see maybe I can watch something. And there was, I think it was Disney, it wasn't, it was a real movie, it wasn't a cartoon, of Aladdin and his lamp. Now, you know, I read the story once long ago, but that comes from Central Asia, by the way. And it was so much fun to watch something like that. Something that didn't have the anger, but that had a good message, a smart message. But you have to be able to jump over this ambivalence. That's a good word, I guess. It's like jumping over a chasm. Like, you know, you have an empty space there that you don't know what it is. And you have to have the courage to peek into that empty space. And when you're holding on to your to something and saying, no, that's bad, that's good, you will never get there. I mean, you may get there. We all get there somehow, even though we do hold for what's good or what's bad. And we try to, we really all do. But there is this doubt, this ambivalence that we all have deep inside us. And out of fear, we hold on to something, but we don't know what we're holding on to. But we still do. And that goodness, the humaneness of the world can help us to have the courage to jump over that chasm. But why do you think the people of Afghanistan today are what our journalists perceive as being bad or whatever? They are scared and they want to protect their little cocoon. And we all want to protect. I want to protect my cocoon, but you know, happens sometimes. And I am scared. We are all scared. We live in a great fear and we're not even aware of what that fear is. But to be honest takes a lot of guts. To be honest and to be kind and to be good. And a human being can do, I think a human being has the potential, but very, very, very few get there. And then other people hang on to it for dear life. It's hard. Life can be a picnic, but it can also be something very unpleasant. Right now, my son, for example, is taking care of his brother-in-law who is dying and going through his agony. And no matter whether the guy is American or German or Chinese or whatever, it is very painful to watch. And they take turns being with him all night long. And so what do? You stick people like that very often, not all of us, and not everybody and everywhere, but you put them in a hospital. And then they are there all alone, fighting something that we don't know what it is. It's both physical and mental. But we are scared, or it's too painful to be there with them, but somebody probably has to be there. People ask me that about my husband and my father. My father, disgusted with the world of Europe in after World War I and all the II. World War II. When I was just born, he became a Buddhist. He saw that you cannot be hoping that a God will save you or anybody else. So, and he was studying philosophy. So he had a lot of books to rely on, intelligent Western books, and he spoke languages and so on and so forth. But he was saying, as he was dying at the city of 10,000 Buddhas and barely walking and not walking and so on, that he would have liked to write a book on how animals live and how they die. He never got to that point, but he was there. And he was very peaceful at the city of 10,000 Buddhists after going all over the world as a Buddhist monk. My husband, but my father officially would say was demented. So what is dementia? That's another whole thing that we can think. Can we say that the people of Afghanistan are all demented, or that the Europeans, Americans in particular, politicians, are demented to go there and try to tell them how to live? I don't know. It goes both ways. And then it's better to be quiet. But what is the noble silence? That's very, very hard. But it is that, to know how to be quiet and just say nothing. But my father, I was going to say, who died very peacefully at the city of 10,000 Buddhas, died alone. He had no problem. I was there in the next room and I could see him barely breathing and the breath would go. And he died in the middle of the night somehow. In the morning, I knew he was gone. My husband also died very quietly. But I was holding his hand all the time because he was happy. He wasn't a Buddhist monk. He was a Muslim, actually, a cultural Muslim, you would say, not a Muslim that was holding on to his Islam, but he understood what the point of Islam was, thanks to his mother and to being educated and having seen the world. So it was, and he had a tremendous sense of humor. And we disagreed very often, as people do, but it would go by the wayside. We would circumvent that. It wasn't easy, but it worked. But he was a jolly man, and he also died peacefully and quietly. So all of that is part of being human and being a good human being and understand what good human beings can do and that there's much more to do. And that needs to be seen and understood in Afghanistan for all of us, and not just go and think that this is, why are they like that? Or why are the Americans are enthusiastic. They want to go and save the world. It's a long road and it's not so simple and it's not all fun. That's another thing. But you have to still be a good human being. And that's just about all I can say. I don't know. That's how it is. And we have to understand time. At least we don't have to do anything. We can just sit there and do nothing. But what we're doing then, if we're sitting and doing no thing, what is that thing that we're not doing? And what is a thing? Is a thought a thing? And are we pushing things away from us when we're not willing to think? And so saying somebody else will do the thinking. We all as human beings think. These thoughts come at us. We're overwhelmed with them. I haven't seen a person who hasn't been overwhelmed with thoughts. But how do you deal with them? I like to think that thoughts are sort of like insects and butterflies flying around, and we're running around with a net trying to catch them, and it doesn't quite work. And then what we catch, what have we caught? We really don't know. So thoughts are words in particular. Since I'm a linguist, I was trained as a linguist, but I wasn't educated by the linguists, or languages educated me, maybe a little bit trained me. I would say they were tools for becoming a better human being, but that's about it. And that's what we do. You have what people do today in the whole world. You are trained so that you can be useful and so that you can have something to think about. But you also have to be educated. So in our lives, at least this is my idea, so don't hold on to it. You could be trained, and anybody who knows how to count, who is human, that means who is a countable person, like an accountant or accountable person, is trained, can be trained. You can train anybody to count. or to write, which is the same thing. And then after you're trained, unfortunately, then what's left also, what you need to have is, shall we say, education. And education is not training. Education is not going to school and learning how to count. Education is something that you do without words, from your family, from where you live and how you behave. And these two help each other, can help, but can also hinder, and that's it. You have the accountables, the ones who aspire to count, and the ones who are educated or educators, but educators still fall into the category of the accountants or the accountants, of the trainers, but they don't have to. They can jump over these two. And you can have a person living in a cave, let's say. Let's not go into caves because they have associations with Afghanistan, but who live in places like caves or away from the world. And they still get an education, sometimes a better one than the one who goes to Harvard, let's say. But what to me is important is the awareness that we need space, or we have the space, not we need it, we have it. And time, we have to respect the time. And time is what today we're running away, trying to find something at the end of that rainbow, but we don't know what it is and how far we are from it. But that keeps us going, run. And thinking that we'll get there. No, we may, I don't know. Nobody has ever been there, wherever the there is, or is there a there. You know, it's all these complicated things, but that's what it is. And the important thing is, and so we talk about truth. Most of the mess that we come at, and that we have gone ourselves in the whole world, is by not telling the truth. We create so much mess out of trying to avoid something, a thought, a work, a training, or whatever. This avoidance, we're circumventing something. And that creates the avoiding, and the avoiding it in fear, because there's fear. We all somehow live in fear. We don't even know what fear is because we try to say it's not there. We run away from it, but we are all under the umbrella of this incredible types of fear. Somebody should study that. Not me, but anyway, psychologists do that sometimes. They study. They think they know it. They don't know it. They make a worse mess of the psychologists and the psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, for example. They try to investigate what's inside you, your thoughts. And that's it. Many of them are very good and help and are nice and whatever. I mean, I'm not saying that psychology, on the contrary, I think it's a very interesting field to study. But this ambivalence is still that. Are you going to be this or that? There's always an either or. There is no either or. And what you are in, though, that's a good thought that just dropped in. You can be ambivalent with a thought, which means that the thought has two sides, two hands, two hands. Or you can live in an ambience. An ambience is not two hands. It's the togetherness of these two ideas, and it creates an atmosphere, an ambience. So if you live in a nice ambience, you're happy. You want to stay there all along, but it's still two things together that sometimes work, sometimes don't. But it is nice. So, what can you do? I've been blathering too much, even though I spent half an hour trying to get into a computer, and I really can't. I'm trying to make friends, and I'm having a very hard time, as you can see, with computers. I sort of manage, but not really. I need help.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Akpinar. You gave a very nice talk, even though we started late.
Of that kind. I could have bored most of you, and I admit I did, but I didn't, but I wasn't bored. So. But I am really very apologetic for the beginning of this talk, but that's being truthful, I guess. And that is the important thing. How are you truthful when you're angry at somebody? I'm not angry at you. Don't say that it's me. But I'm not angry even. I try to get through all of this without attaching to anger and trying to keep it together as much as I could.
Yeah. I think you helped to open our awareness about Central Asia and Afghanistan in particular. So
the whole world is like that. Afghanistan is right now, it's in the limelight.
Yeah.
And politics, luckily I didn't go into politics because I have a hard time with politics. Not that politics itself is good or bad, but it tends to shove things into the wrong direction.
Yeah, let's not go into politics.
Let's not ever do that.
I think for tonight, we probably have to end the lecture, and maybe Dharmester Young has.
Yeah, please.
Something
and I
to
apologize say. Again.
Well, I don't have anything to say, just appreciate Dr. Akpinar. It's a really nice talk. We really appreciate it. Maybe we'll dedicate merit. Is that?
I didn't understand it. But...
so can you lead us to dedicate merit?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we put our palms together. And may the merit from this practice adorn all the Buddha's lands, repay the kindness from above, and rescue those in paths below. May all who see or hear of this resolve upon awakening, and when this body meets and be born together in the land of bliss. 3 bows to the Buddha. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Amitofo, appreciate everyone's patience to hear the talk. Half an hour late, but it was good. Good night.